podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
After 18 weeks, 32 teams become 14 in a quest to lift the Lombardi Trophy. The number one seeds are set. The road to Super Bowl 59 goes through Kansas City in the AFC, and for the first time in franchise history, it goes through Detroit in the NFC. The Chiefs and the Lions get to rest this weekend and watch the other 12 teams battle it out to join them in the divisional round. So, what are we waiting for? Let's turn the page and look ahead to the playoffs. It's Wildcard Weekend in the NFL.
Graves on Gridiron with Richard Graves.
Hello, welcome along to the show. This is Graves on Gridiron. I am your host, Richard Graves. If you're wondering where we've been for the last fortnight, apologies. The team have been visiting families around the globe, but we are back. Wildcard Weekend is on the horizon, and if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, then you will see a familiar face waiting to preview all 6 games with us. There's only one thing to say, Charles Dagnall. Let's bake, baby.
Let's bake, baby. My God, I tell you what, Richard, we were texting each other whilst the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were playing against the Saints. And honestly, I was trembling as I was texting you. My thumbs wouldn't necessarily make the words that I wanted to make to you. You're having a great time in my suffering, knowing full well that your Cowboys were done and dusted. And you could
We don't talk about the Cowboys. Their season's over, Charles.
Yeah, Trey Lance, there's one for the future. Anyway, and you could feel my pain, and I felt like I needed oxygen at especially at halftime where we'd looked pretty ordinary. And then I think it was a big third down and long, deep in Buccaneers territory, and Baker runs and scrambles for about 15, 16 yards, gets the first down, and that's when things really sort of started to roll. But I'm delighted the Bucs were there. I breathed an enormous sigh of relief at the end of that one. I think you could probably tell by my text messaging that I was a lot more calm come 9 o'clock and was hugely delighted when Mike Evans got his 11,000 yard season tying Jerry Rice. So that was a great moment, an important moment. I might explain more why I think that in when we actually preview the game. But yeah, it's sad in a weird way. I know we're looking forward to the wildcard weekend, super wildcard weekend, but now the regular season is done and we've got to wait until next September for it all to come round again. There is that kind of element of
there
sadness.
is that kind of thing. And the one thing that did occur to me is as we got towards the final half an hour of the early window slot of games on Sunday night, if you're like me, this is what you live for. Oh. When you have Scott Hansen, and he calls it the witching hour, and you have the culmination, for supposedly what was essentially a meaningless round of games for half the teams involved, and yet the number of games that came down to the final 10 seconds, the final play. I don't care who you are, what sport you follow, I promise you there is no sport anywhere else in the world that has finishers week in, week out like the National Football League.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I don't think there is a broadcaster. I've said this to many, many people. And look, we've worked in broadcasting a long time, both of us, in slightly similar areas and also in different areas. I don't think there is a broadcast like it on the planet. I don't think there is. I think, and with one guy holding it all together, granted, you've got the material. When you've got great material, then of course your program's going to be good. But how it's knitted together, how they string you along and get tense, isn't it one of the fundamentals of broadcasting? How can you make me care about something what I actually don't necessarily care about? That's how. That is how on that program. So it'll be sad not to see it, but I think the best 2 weekends of the season are coming up right now in the Super Wildcard weekend and then divisional weekend. I think the best 2 weeks of the season.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, Daggers. For the llast 3 years, I absolutely have agreed with you. This particular year, I'm looking forward to it. It's just missing something. I can't. A big franchise, the richest franchise in sports, would make it, cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake for me. But I'm not going to dwell on it. We're going to move on, and we're going to start our previews with the perennial, when it comes to Wildcard Weekend, the perennial Wildcard Weekend game openers. are pretty much always those Houston Texans hosting the Los Angeles Chargers, 9:30 p.m. kickoff UK time to get us underway this weekend. The Chargers start out as 3-point favorites on the road. What are your opening thoughts?
Well, I really love all the matchups of this weekend. I think there are some fascinating battles, again, for different reasons. This one, it makes me sound a little sour, in that I'm glad Houston and the LA Chargers are playing each other, because then one of them gets knocked out. I'm not necessarily hugely excited by either. What I do like is that Jim Harbaugh has come in to the Chargers. You know, their whole remit was to get into the playoffs and to be a competitive team. He has done just that. It might take, like any new head coach, this is his first season in charge, but he has decent weapons at his disposal. Still think they could add the wide receiver room a little bit, but Quentin Johnston's come on in the last couple of weeks as well. A career day for him, for the rookie wide receiver last weekend. And the Houston Texans, after, CJ Stroud's great first year as a rookie, has had a little bit of second season syndrome, just a little, but they're still division champions. I don't think either are going to be Super Bowl worthy or Super Bowl contenders. So I think that the best of these two actually making it to the divisional round, I like this matchup. It still intrigues me. I still think there are some very interesting pieces. But Houston Texans have been hit by a little bit of injury. I finally get to see, I think we're finally getting to see Justin Herbert with a sort of run-based attack. He's got J.K. Dobbins in there, and that's what Jim Harbaugh has turned around. And then that becomes a much more balanced offense, I think. So I'm intrigued by this matchup, but I don't think we're going to be talking about one of these two sides in a couple of weeks' time. That said, I'm leaning Chargers-wise, even though the Texans are at home. I just don't think necessarily all of it has come together the way that DeMeco Ryans has probably sort of planned out pre-season. You expected a build season after last year. I don't think that has necessarily come to fruition. And I quite like the Chargers, but I fancy it could be close.
I'm not as sour on this game as you are. And I'll tell you what, first of all, I agree with what your comments are on the Houston Texans. I think they've been a bit unlucky. They tried to give CJ Stroud some more weapons. Obviously, Stephon Diggs didn't work out with that mid-season injury. They've had more receivers to the receiving core as well. Joe Mixon, on the other hand, he's done everything they hoped for and more, passing 1,000 rushing yards this season. I do think that maybe it was set up to fail a little bit for CJ Stroud, because rightly so, he won rave reviews for his rookie season. I'm not going to say he's regressed this year. He's perhaps plateaued a little bit. 20 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions thrown. They flew out of the blocks. They won 5 of their first 6 games, but they've ended up being a bit streaky, because after that, they then went to run when they lost 3 of their next 4. They also suffered a home defeat to the Tennessee Titans, people forget, back in November as well. And they haven't exactly been charging their way into the playoffs. Now, you look at their opponents, and I can hear the football aficionados yelling either at their mobile device, listening to this podcast, at the screen if they're watching on YouTube, because the one thing any football aficionado will tell you is defense wins championships. Well, look out, because Jim Harbaugh's gone into LA. He's turned the Chargers round in his first season. They finished second in their division, second only to the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who have had to win 15 games to walk away with that. But perhaps more importantly, the Chargers go into the playoffs with the number 1 ranked scoring defense. That means they give up fewer points per game on average than anybody else in the NFL. Fewer than 18 points a game on average. And if your defense is doing that, you are in the game no matter what. And you mentioned it there. Their offense is predicated on a strong running game. They took a bit of a flyer by bringing in former Ravens veterans in J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Both have had injuries over the course of this season, but they have run the ball well. They've run the ball effectively. And when you've got somebody of the caliber of Justin Herbert under center at quarterback, that gives you an opportunity. We saw it again last weekend when they just took apart the opponents going into the final game of the season to make sure they finished it with a win. The Raiders had the lead in that game at one point. Didn't matter to the Chargers. Back they came. So I'm with you in the sense that I'm leaning towards the Chargers on this one. I'm a little bit more positive about them than you. I like the Chargers. I think Jim Harbaugh's done a terrific job in his opening season over there in LA. And I don't think if you're in the AFC, this is a team you want to be facing when it comes to knockout football. So for this wildcard round preview, in fact, for the whole playoffs, we're doing two things. We're calling a game against the line, but we're calling it outright as well. So I'm happy to go first on this so I can set you up later, Daggers. I make no apologies. I'm taking I'm taking the Chargers as 3-point favourites to cover. I don't think it's going to be a shootout, but I think defensively they'll be able to stifle CJ Stroud and his relatively limited options at receiver, and they're going to win outright as well. So I'm going on a double for the LA Chargers in the opening game of Wildcard.
Yeah, I am not as confidently, but I'm doing the same as you. I think they win it. They probably win it by maybe a touchdown, maybe a couple of field goals or something like that. I'm also with you. I think D'Amico Ryans has got a scheme really, really well against the LA Chargers. I just think they're in a better position. They've had to face. You look at the division that Houston are in with Indy and Jacksonville and Tennessee, and even though they lost to Tennessee, but I think their route to 9 wins, was it? I think, or maybe 10 wins. 10 wins, yeah. But their route to 10 wins against the Chargers' route when you've got KC in your division, when you've got Denver, a much improved Denver in your division as well. I'm with you. I don't see a huge covering of the spread, but I see them covering it. And we are both aligned in our thoughts, I think, for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll get us underway on Saturday night. For those hardy NFL fans, outside of the fact of whether you're a Steeler fan or a Ravens fan, the second game kicks off at 1 a.m. Sunday morning, UK time. The Steelers, they seem to be in complete control of the AFC North not a month ago. They finished the season 10-7. They now have to travel to the Baltimore Ravens, who finished the season like a steam train with a 12-5 record. It won't surprise anybody that the Ravens are heavy favourites, given the way the two teams have ended up coming into the postseason section. The Steelers come into it off the back of 4 straight defeats. They talk about wanting to play the best football in December. The Steelers have done anything but. Contrast that with the Ravens. They've won 5 of their last 6, and they're scoring points for fun. If I tell you the opening line on this game sees the Ravens as 10-point favourites, Staggers, are you surprised?
I'm not surprised, given the form coming in. And I think when you look at the Steelers, who have practically limped into the playoffs, there's a telling factor as well for me in that, the streak of Mike Tomlin of winning seasons is enormous, a massive streak.
He just doesn't have a losing season, does he?
But he hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. That's the most telling stat for me. It's all very well getting these winning seasons and getting yourself into the playoffs, and that is, of course, a commendable thing, and he's a high quality. And we know the Pittsburgh Steelers do not rotate coaches like every other side in the NFL. But that is a glaring stat for me. I think Russell Wilson, since George Pickens has come back from injury, he's not been hugely effective. The rhythm of the Steelers offense, Russ went 6-1 in his first 7 starts and then has unfortunately come back in the last 4 games and only thrown 4 touchdown passes. That is a concerning stat for me. The one thing that I will say about the Steelers, top of the NFL in takeaways, and I think they're going to have to lean heavy on their defense. They're going to have to hope that TJ Watt, who's had a quiet 3 games in the last 3 games, or he's not laid a hand on a quarterback, I think, in the last 3 games. So they need their big players to step up. I think they need to try and somehow stop the twin threat of Derrick Henry. Oh, by the way, just the almost 2,000 yards rushing this year and 16 touchdowns. And I think 915 yards rushing of Lamar Jackson. In their own home, they may be missing Zay Flowers, but they've still got Isaiah Likely. They've still got Mark Andrews, twin tight end threats. They've still got Rashad Bateman. They've still got weapons. I don't know whether I can cover the spread. I don't know whether I can against the Baltimore Ravens, who started the year defensively very poorly. But if you look at their recent stats on defense, they are very, very strong. I think after week 11, they have turned it around hugely. Look, Richard, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. A lot of the time in the playoffs, you got to go with your gut. I can't see the Steelers overcoming the Baltimore Ravens. 10 points is a big one, and I'm loath to go over. But
I'm going to hold you right there because they open up as 10-point favourites. That is not the spread we're looking at for this game. And I'll tell you the reason why. They've split the series. It might surprise you as AFC North rivals, one apiece this season. In the game that the Steelers won, there were mistakes from the Ravens. They turned the ball over. The Steelers had enough to win the game. 18-16
game. Yeah.
In Pittsburgh, exactly. Now, you go back just 3 weeks ago when the game was being played at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, 34-17 to the Baltimore Ravens. And you mentioned the two names you've got to look out for there, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Henry was brought into Baltimore in the offseason for exactly this time of year to take some of the weight, the burden, the pressure off of the shoulders of quarterback Lamar Jackson, who has arguably had, despite having 2 MVP seasons, he's arguably had, for me, his best season as a quarterback in Baltimore. Listen to this, 41 touchdown passes to just 4 interceptions. Now, the regular listeners to the show will be all too well aware, and certainly the Ravens fans that I know are all too well aware, that I've never fully bought into Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. There's no doubt he can make plays with his legs. I have question marks about his accuracy in the key moments of big-time games when it matters most. We saw that a little bit against the Kansas City Chiefs when he had this high-octane offense last year in the AFC Championship game, and the Chiefs' defense did enough to stifle him. The Ravens couldn't even score 20 points in that game. I do just wonder this time, though, whether it's a different Ravens offense because Derrick Henry is in the backfield. Because now, it's they've always been strong running the ball, but you have got a juggernaut in Derrick Henry. You see him set off, and he's gone. Against the Steelers, against Cleveland last weekend, they kept him quiet for the first half. Second half, he lit up the place and suddenly finished with over 100 yards rushing without even batting an eyelid. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers' strength, no question about it for me, it lies in their defense. You've mentioned TJ Watt, who's a one-man wrecking machine on his day. They're ranked 8th in the NFL this season against the pass, 7th in points allowed, only giving up an average of 20.5 points a game, and they're top 4 in takeaways as well. If they are to cause the upset, then their defense has to come to play. The problem they've got is that the Baltimore Ravens have just got better and better as the season's gone on. I spoke to Ravens fans earlier in the year and they complained about throwing away leads late in the game. That home game week 2 against the Raiders springs to mind particularly. They haven't been doing that of late. They are in form. They're on song defensively. They're playing good, solid football as well. Offensively, as a unit, number 2 overall in the NFL, 7th in passing, 2nd on the ground, running the ball, 3rd in points scored. They're putting over 30 points a game on the board, and I just can't see any way that the Steelers, with all their problems, you mentioned Russell Wilson, keep up with that. So, if it goes to form for me, then not only do the Ravens win this game, but I'm looking at the total points spread for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which stands at 18.5. That's the line going into this game. The reason for that, just look at their last 4 games. They scored 17 in defeat against the Bengals last week, 10 in defeat against the Kansas City Chiefs the week before, 17 in the loss 3 weeks ago against Baltimore, 13 in the loss at Philadelphia. The last 4 weeks, they haven't reached 18 points. So I'm going to go under 18.5 points in a blowout win for the Ravens. Baltimore wins it.
Yeah. And again, it'd be great if we actually sat here and sort of just disagreed for the sake of great viewership and great audience. I totally agree with you. I can't see, and here's my issue, is Baltimore have been found one, and I could quite happily sit here and go, yeah, Richard Graves, I told you all about Lamar Jackson and his accuracy, and he would have been. And in fact, you were just down. I had the same concerns. I had concerns about his accuracy. I did. What a great dual threat quarterback he is. But I had the very same concerns. Now, it seems to me, added the missing piece of the puzzle. And it's a hell of a good missing piece, isn't it, in Derrick Henry? And I just wonder how you scheme against that. And what's happening is, and maybe this is helping Lamar in a different way. If you've obviously got to try and spy Lamar, but also shore up the run against Derrick Henry, then your secondary has to just sit back just a little bit and give a bit of breathing room for the receivers and the tight ends. And that allows those windows for Lamar, and therefore that little bit of extra time, because you've got so many different areas as a defense you've got to try and cover. So I agree with you. I think the Baltimore Ravens need a statement win in the playoffs, because they have been, they've had some great sides that have come up short in the last couple of years or so. I'm with you. I think it's a blowout. I think the Steelers don't get close. And the Baltimore Ravens don't necessarily have to rely on Justin Tucker to win it, who's had a very, very suspect season for him. So yeah, I can't see 18 points. Yeah, I'm just leaning under. I can see Chris.
So we're in agreement.
Yeah, we're in agreement. We are in agreement again.
Daggers and Graves in lockstep through the first two games. That wraps up the opening night of the playoffs. We'll look at the Sunday evenings next on Graves on Gridiron. Don't go away.
Graves on Gridiron.
Welcome back. We've previewed Saturday's opening two games from Wildcard Weekend. On to Sunday evening and a 6 o'clock kickoff, Daggers. I'm looking forward to this one. There's a buzz about the Denver Broncos, but they have to go to Buffalo to take on the Bills. The Broncos with a 10-7 record to finish the regular season. The Bills at 13-4. Going into this game, it's the veteran Josh Allen, who's been often the bridesmaid, never the bride so far in the postseason, against Bo Nix, this rookie that Sean Payton picked in the NFL draft this past off-season, who has just got better and better as the season has gone on. But is he good enough to take Denver in their first playoff appearance in 8 years into Buffalo and cause the upset?
No, moving on. In fact, yeah. Do you know what makes me laugh? If I could just digress a second and mention the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, this has made me giggle a little bit. Now, I don't know if you saw any of the Kansas.
You do realise the entire AFC is now groaning because the Chiefs aren't even in the Wildcard Weekend, and you're talking.
But it's made me laugh. It has made me laugh because they basically, you or I could have played for the Kansas City Chiefs and put in a slightly better performance in their final game of the season, right? Where they've got absolutely...
I've got a lot of Bronco fans that were buzzing on the back of that victory, Daggers. You're upsetting them right now.
You could have put the plume of feathers 5th 11 out there, right? The Red Lions, like core drinkers, and they would have performed better than the Kansas City Chiefs. Because what that did is I kind of like it, because I don't think, honestly, anyone really fancied playing Cincinnati if they made it, because of that high-powered offense. And even though they're defensively wanting, no one fancied playing Cincinnati in the playoffs. What they've also done, Kansas City, has got Denver Broncos into a real groove, because they did have a great groove. That first half that they played against the Chiefs was absolutely outstanding. Bo Nix, was he 18 of 18? Or maybe 18 of 19?
Something ridiculous like that. Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe one incompletion in the entire first half.
And so they've got a groove. And so they're now going up in a groove to the Buffalo Bills, and the Kansas City Chiefs might be thinking, well, that's quite nice for us, you know. And that's what's tickled me about that game. Of course, none of that really will have entered their heads, but it's just made me laugh. I like this Bo Nix. I do. I think there's a slight chip on the shoulder where you're the 6th out of 6 of the top quarterbacks taken in the first round, and he has grown and progressed throughout the season. He's got a little bit of moxie about him, a bit of chip on the shoulder. We saw him and Sean Payton having a little bit of a set to earlier on. And I think that's what Sean Payton likes. He wants a bit of, something to fire up against, and to know that his quarterback is, not only listening and learning, but also has that belief in himself that he can go on. And I'm really liking what I've seen out of Nick so far. I think they've got, Cortland Sutton looked like a brand new receiver. He's a real threat downfield, especially in one-on-one situations.
And it's great chemistry between the two of them.
Fantastic. As well. Really, really good. Mims, that sprightly, utility type of player who can sort of eke in and out of tight spots. And defensively, the Denver Broncos have been absolutely top draw. The spine of that team. When you think.
Well, let me back you up on that. They're sixth best in the NFL when defending the run. They don't give up many points in games. 19.4 on average per game. That's the fourth best scoring defense in the league, and a big reason for that, without doubt, has got to be cornerback Patrick Surtain.
Oh.
He has been outstanding. His play in the secondary has been elite. And if they are to win in Buffalo this weekend, it's going to be, I feel, on the back of their...
Yes, it will be, but I honestly, Richard, I just can't see it. I really can't see them going into Buffalo House. It's going to be absolutely crazy. As we know, the Bills Mafia will be up in Orchard Park. Josh Allen is, he's been widely touted as the MVP for this year. I think you could probably pick, three players. Add Saquon into that, add Lamar Jackson into that. There may be some others that I might forget. Baker Mayfield, perhaps. Anyway, but I think that
I tried to keep a straight face.
Yeah, I know you did. I just thought I'd just slide it in there. No, I thought I would. But I think that Buffalo in their own house is a completely different prospect. They are playoff savvy. They are experienced in the postseason. Josh Allen, there's a sort of sense of destiny about his play this year, and he really has. From what we expected right at the beginning of the season, we talked and we thought, what have Buffalo done this offseason? Goodness me, what a coaching job Sean McDermott's done. He really has, because a lot of people were writing off the Buffalo Bills, getting rid of...
Sean McDermott was on the hot seat at the start of the season.
And getting rid of, the Stephon Diggses. There was seemingly no receiver core. Well, goodness me. Amari Cooper they've brought in at the trade deadline. Shakir has been a fabulous player for them this year. And the running game in James Cook, has been good enough. Allen himself, I think he's been just electric to watch this year. And even though defensively they're not as strong, I find it very difficult to believe that the Broncos, with a rookie quarterback, first time back in the playoffs since Peyton Manning led them to Super Bowl 50, I think this is too much of an ask, but really excited about the Broncos in year 2 and year 3 of Nick's.
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to, and many Broncos fans feel that they might have caught lightning in a bottle this season. I will say this about the Buffalo Bills, though. As good as the Broncos defense has been this year, this Bills offense is something else, and it's in no small part due to the fact Josh Allen is looking after the football. Remember last year, he led the league in interceptions? Yeah, well, this time around, 28 passing touchdowns to just 6 interceptions, and that doesn't even count the plays he makes with his legs. He's got over 500 yards rushing this year, 12 rushing touchdowns this season. And you mentioned James Cook in the backfield. Well, he might have finished just shy of 1,000 rushing yards, but he averages 5 yards a carry and has 15 touchdowns. That's a problem. The line that really caught my eye was the Buffalo Bills total points line in this game. It's set at 20.5 points. So to cover it, they'd have to score 29. I'm going to let you go first on this one.
So to cover it, they've got to score
29 against the number 4 ranked scoring defense in the NFL.
Problem is, and here is what I will say, is when the Buffalo Bills have been hot, they get really hot. And 29 points against the Denver Broncos. One thing, look, there's a lot more on the line. It's knockout ball. I don't think this is a Ravens-Steelers situation where I do envisage a blowout. I can see it being a little bit closer. Obviously, I am taking the Buffalo Bills to win. 29 points, big ask. It's a big ask against that defense, and I'm going to lean under. I'm leaning under on that one.
So you're taking the Bills to win outright?
I'm taking the Bills to win outright.
And fewer than 29 points in the game?
Yes.
We're going to disagree on this.
What say you?
We're going to disagree because outright, I agree. At home, the way Josh Allen's playing, the Bills win this game. But I'm also going to take them winning it by putting points on the board. They'll go over 28 and a half points. And I will tell you why. Because as well as the Denver Broncos defense has played this year, listen to over the last month, some of these games that they've played. They shut out second, third string Kansas City Chiefs last weekend. Back in December, they conceded 13 at home in a win against the Indianapolis Colts. They conceded 19 on the road in November against the Raiders, 6 at home against the Atlanta Falcons. Well, in the defeats they've had, they come into the playoffs having lost 2 of their last 3. The only win last weekend against the Chiefs B team. They lost 30 points to 24 in overtime against the Bengals. They shipped 34 points in a loss on the road to the LA Chargers, who you wouldn't say were prolific. They got thrashed earlier in the season in November by the Baltimore Ravens, who scored 41 points. My concern about this Denver Broncos defense is that they can be got at. They can ship points. They beat the Cleveland Browns, remember, in December, 41-32. How on earth did the Browns score 32 points in any game? And then you look at the Buffalo Bills and what they've done. In the last 11 games, 9 of them, they've hit 30 points or more. This Bills team has been sneakily good.
I'm not buying it, Richard. I'm not buying this. The Cincinnati Bengals, at the moment, at home, when they played against the Denver Broncos, they conceded 30. You're asking 29, over 29 points. There is no more high-powered passing attack than Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. And there's 1 point over 29. This is bold from you, Graves. I like it. I like bold. However, I'm confident. I am confident we'll have a cup of tea on that at Headingley one day.
The stats speak for themselves, Daggers. Go big or go home. It's been a great story for Bo Nix, Sean Payton, and the Denver Broncos. It ends this Sunday night in Buffalo, and the Bills kill it dead. Take the Bills to win outright. Take the Bills to do it by scoring at least 29 points in the game. It's the first point of difference between the two of us. I'm sure it won't be the last, and it might change with the next game. At Lincoln Financial Field, the home of those beloved Philadelphia Eagles, NFC East champions. 14-3 record, 14 wins, and you're not the number 1 seed. Yeah. They're not the only team to make that this postseason. Hosting the 11-6 Green Bay Packers. Going into this game, of course, with home field advantage, I won't surprise you by saying that the Eagles are 4.5-point favourites. Of course, the Packers themselves, they had the setback, if you like, of losing to a last-second field goal at home to the Chicago Bears in it was a scarcely believable final couple of minutes to that game last Sunday. But perhaps more importantly, wide receiver Christian Watson left the game with an ACL injury. He will be out for an extended period of time. Reports initially say there was further damage as well. He is their deep threat wide receiver. And against a team like the Eagles, you don't need me to tell you, if you're going to beat them, you've got to be good on defense. You've got to be able to stretch their secondary and run the football well. You lose Christian Watson, your deep threat, that's a problem. And of course, these two teams met in the opening week in that first ever regular season game in Brazil, when a mistake-riddled game saw the Eagles come out on top. The Packers dodged a bullet, if you remember, in that game as well, where Jordan Love left it late with a knee injury. Thankfully, not as serious as it first looked. But my question to you, Daggers, is do Green Bay have enough to reverse that result and progress against the Eagles in the playoffs?
No, I really don't see it. And I think that of football teams that are really well-rounded, I think the Philadelphia Eagles have got a lot of bases covered. Vic Fangio and his defense this year have been marked improvements from the season before. Again, there's a sort of weird similarity, I suppose, with the Baltimore Ravens, is that you bring in a veteran running back and the effect that he's had, Saquon, and going 2,000 yards. And that takes so much pressure off Jalen Hurts. Now, okay, he hasn't been as prolific, but his ball security has been far better when you still add in your receiving threats. There was a little blip in the middle of the season when I think there was injuries that suffered in the passing game. But, you got Devonta Smith, you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Jalen Hurts, you've got Saquon Barkley. I mean, this is a seriously good offensive line. So when he's protected in that way, he's bought the time to find his threats. Defensively, what did the Philadelphia Eagles need to do in the offseason? They needed help in the secondary. They went out and got that. Their secondary has been overhauled. It has performed very, very well. As for the Packers, going into Lincoln Financial, there is one thing I will say about the Eagles is that the expectation from Eagles fans is always fantastically high. If they do get behind the 8 ball, and this is where Green Bay can actually have some effect, their crowd lets them know very, very quickly that they're not happy with things. So they can get on their back. But it would take an awful lot for the Green Bay Packers to overcome a Philadelphia Eagles side, which I think is one of the best all-round rosters in the NFL. I really do. Josh Jacobs had a great season. Again, he has helped out Jordan Love in a big way. The loss of the deep threat in Christian Watson is a hindrance to Green Bay, but they have got numerous ways they can hurt you. But again, I have to lean with the records. I have to lean with the gut and say that Philadelphia, not many teams have beaten them this year. Only 3 teams, one of them being, of course, the playoff-bound Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have also beaten the Detroit Lions this year. So that's obviously a good... Oh, we'll come to the Buccaneers, I know. But
you keep digressing.
Sorry, I just can't help it. You're reeling me back in. I see the Philadelphia Eagles winning. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it was going to be a miles better game than the one that we saw on Mexico on that field that we had. So I'm leaning that way. I don't know what spread we're going here, Richard. Right, you've not given us an indication. I'm sure you will now when you give us your thoughts.
Well, the spread on the game is the Eagles go into it as 4.5-point favourites. However,
yes.
Once again, that is not the line I'm looking at. It is Green Bay Packers total points for this game. The line for that is at 21.5 points, which on the face of it, to me at least, seems extraordinarily appealing when you consider they have the 8th ranked scoring offense in the NFL, averaging 27.1 points per game. I, though, hesitate because this game depends on 2 things. One, and the most important thing, is will Jalen Hurts be fit enough to play? As of yesterday, we're recording this on Tuesday night. On Monday, according to the estimated injury report, because, of course, the players don't take the practice field till Wednesday, he was still in concussion protocol. I've got to believe that he will emerge from that because he picked up a concussion, of course, in week 17. I think the chances are highly likely he'll be fit and good to go. If he's good to go, that's a dilemma for the Packers because you've got a dual threat quarterback that can make plays with his legs as well as his arm. You've got to keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket. It's my belief that if you turn him into a pure quarterback, then he's not nearly the same threat. However, a bit like with the Baltimore Ravens, that becomes a lot more difficult when you've got Saquon Barkley in the backfield. 2,000 rushing yards this season, team before self. He had a chance to take the NFL historical rushing record in a regular season. Eric Dickerson was worried. Saquon Barkley said, no, I understand. This is about the bigger picture. We want the Lombardi Trophy. So he sits out week 18, making sure he's in the best possible shape for a playoff run. And I think that's highlights the character you've got when you go and sign somebody of Saquon Barkley's standing from a divisional rival, as the Eagles did in the offseason. They could not have dreamed of getting the production out of him, both on and off the field that they have. I'm going to take this opportunity to plug another podcast I do, Science for Sport. I had the opportunity this week to speak to a guy called Dave Hancock, who's a physiotherapist and a strength coach. He works one-on-one, has done the last 2 years with Saquon Barkley, and I don't think it's any coincidence that suddenly, having had an injury-riddled NFL career the last 2 years, he's been largely fit, healthy on the field. I'd advise you to go and listen to that as well. But this, for me, is where it matters most. It's what he can do at the business end of the season, postseason football. Remember, 12 months ago, the Eagles came into it on a terrible run, lost 5 of their last 6, got bounced out of the playoffs, I believe, by your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Daggers,
Yes.
in the wildcard round. I don't see that happening this time. And this is the reason why. We speak about the Eagles offensively. Just look at what they've done defensively. They are ranked number 1 in the NFL when it comes to total overall defense. Number 1 defending the pass. Number 2 in points allowed. They're only giving up 17.8 points per game on average this season. They're a top 10 run defense. They're 13th when it comes to takeaways. We've already mentioned the issue Green Bay have losing Christian Watson. I get where the Packers fans are coming from, where they say, look at our top 8 ranked scoring offense. I just think you've had a few issues coming into this game. You've lost 2 straight against the Minnesota Vikings on the road and then the Chicago Bears. And now you've got a team that you're facing on the road that's one of, if not the best overall defense in the NFL in all aspects of the game. And if this turns into a game where the Eagles hit the front early and the Packers have got to play catch-up, I think you're just playing into the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're on that defensive line, you pin your ears back and you go after Jordan Love. If you get ahead early, you effectively take away the run game that Matt LaFleur likes and Josh Jacobs has been so good at this season. So in Lincoln Financial Field, you're asking me to believe that the Packers are going to score at least 22 points? Well, the Eagles in their last few games gave up 13 points with a B team playing against the New York Giants. They gave up just 7 on the road against the Dallas Cowboys. 13 in a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers, 16 against the Carolina Panthers when the Panthers were supposedly getting hot. Just 19 points on the road in a win over the Baltimore Ravens. I'm sorry. You look at that line initially, I think the odds makers are trying to reel us in. I'm going under 21.5 points, taking the Eagles to win. What do you say, Daggers?
Again, I'm in alignment with you. I just can't see it. I think there's too much in that defense, which, again, Vic Fangio has done a hell of a job this year in the defensive coordinator position. And I have no doubts that given what we've seen of the Packers, they have blown hot and cold, mainly hot, but I think when you come up against a side with the weapons that Philadelphia have on both sides of the ball, I find it very difficult to see them getting 21 points.
So under and the Eagles?
Under and Eagles.
We're back in lockstep. Okay, don't go away. 4 games previewed, 2 still to come. Daggers can hardly contain his excitement. We'll be back in a few seconds.
Graves on Gridiron.
Welcome back. 4 games previewed. This is the one Daggers has been waiting for. Sunday night football. The Washington Commanders are back in the postseason with a 12-5 record, a rookie quarterback at the helm, a first-year head coach in Dan Quinn in Washington, going to Florida to take on the Buccaneers at 10-7 for the second straight season. They scraped into the playoffs with a final day win. Baker Mayfield leading the way. And if you're watching on YouTube, Daggers has got his Bucks ball out already. The line I'm looking at for this, Daggers, the Buccaneers, by virtue of having home field advantage, are 3-point favourites. But it's the total points for this game. The line is 50.5 for the Commanders, who are red hot in the first half of the season against Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers at home. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, I know I have my fun. We've been very, very watchable this year, I've got to say. If you're a neutral watching the Bucks, you're never quite sure what's going on. When they get hot, they get really hot. I mean, when Baker is on, he is on. One thing I've loved about the Bucks this year with Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator is that we've got a run game back. We actually have. We went out and got Graham Barton in the center of the offensive line, the first draft pick. I think he's been a really good find for the Bucks to shore up that offensive line, open up holes. For Bucky Irving, another rookie who's had a 1,000-yard season and very wispish and real strong runner for a quite slight-framed guy. But, despite the horrific injury list that the Bucs have had, and especially on defense, they've been really watchable. Sometimes you want to pull your hair out. You do, as a Bucs fan. You're just thinking, what on earth? We had a Baker Mayfield designed run. No, let him scramble. Let him scramble. That's fine. And when he does, he is one of these sides that does, players that does put his team on his back. And the team are with him. I think he's a perfect fit. I really do. Are they going to win the Super Bowl? No, they're not. Of course, they're not going to win the Super Bowl. I think, on the flip side of that, I've really enjoyed watching the Commanders come back. It's always nice to see a side that have been so down and out actually have a bit of a renaissance. And this young quarterback, Jaden Daniels, I mean, he's just, again, another very, very watchable player. I think it's too early for them, possibly. The Bucs have won division the last 4 years. I think, going on the road, I think it might be, and they've still got holes on defense, the Washington Commanders. So I think that the Bucs do win it. I think it might be a high-scoring affair. I really do. I think 50 is, I would go over. Personally, I think we're going to see more points than 50 from both of these two sides, because the Bucs can't play defense, nor can the Washington Redskins, and both offenses can get pretty hot.
Commanders, Daggers, Commanders.
Sorry. The Commanders. It's because I was talking about yesteryear. And I see a lot of points in this game. I think it's going to be hugely entertaining. I think the Bucs sneak it. But I do like seeing, I love watching CJ Stroud last year. I've loved watching Jaden Daniels this year. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah, he's been sensational in his rookie year. We spoke about it in a show at the start of the season. I said it coming out of the draft. For me, he was going to be my offensive rookie MVP. And I've seen nothing to change that opinion. What I do have slight concerns over is in the second half of the season, as well as the Commanders have finished through the month of December into January, that Cliff Kingsbury offense, we saw it time and time again as head coach in Arizona. First half of the season, they'd tear teams apart. Second half of the season, not so much. They'd cough and splutter. And we've seen that big time in games. A couple in particular stand out. The home loss to Pittsburgh, then the home game, especially against the Dallas Cowboys, when for 3 quarters they couldn't get out of their own way. Dallas weren't exactly a team firing on all cylinders, and yet they were making their defense look like the steel curtain at times. Okay, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but the point remains the same, that offensively, they seem to go missing for large chunks of games. Now, Jaden Daniels, with his talent and his natural ability, has been able to find Terry McLaurin. They've got a great rapport, and it's worked out for them. But I'm with you. I think this game is won in the trenches, and you referred to the running game. I think that's been one of the biggest turnarounds this season across any organization. If they weren't dead last, they were next to last season, the Buccaneers, when it came to running the ball. Well, this time around, Rashad White started the season as their lead running back. He's now taken by committee role alongside the rookie, Bucky Irving. They have the number 4 ranked rushing offense in the NFL. And what's been the biggest problem for the Washington Commanders this season? It is on defense, stopping the run. Only 2 teams in the entire league have worse rushing defense records than the Washington Commanders. And you mentioned what we said about Baker Mayfield. A play's never dead. He scrambles, he makes it happen. Do you know, coming out of the regular season, no team, not the Kansas City Chiefs, not the Baltimore Ravens, no one has a better third down conversion percentage than those Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into the playoffs. A lick under 51% conversion successful rating this season. No other team has reached 49%. And the Washington Commanders are down there, middle of the road. So I think this is a game one in the trenches. Vita Vea, a mammoth in the heart of that defensive line for the Buccaneers to stop the run, although Austin Eckler being back is a bonus now for the Commanders. I like the Bucs going into this. I'll ask you for your prediction outright and on the line. I think you've already said, haven't you? You like the Bucs and over 50? Well, I'm going to disagree with you. I like the Bucs, but I don't think we're going to see 50.5 points scored in this game. I think this, bit like the Denver Broncos, is the end of the road for the Washington Commanders. No shootout here, I'm afraid. I'm taking under 50.5 points in this game.
Have you seen us play defense? Have you seen us? Come through.
I am familiar with your work.
Oh, my goodness me. Hey, just a quick one on that third down stat. But do you know how the Washington Commanders are not great on third down? Have you seen their fourth down conversion rate? 20 of 23 on fourth down. Almost 90% of their fourth downs that they've gone for, they have achieved. That will happen against the Tampa Bay defense. Trust me.
I was going to say, the Washington Commanders, red hot on fourth down. Nobody has got a better fourth down conversion percentage this year than the Commanders. I don't think it matters. I'm riding the bake train. I'm baking with Baker and the Buccaneers, and I'm taking under 50.5 points. Okay, we've got one more game to go. I think for a second I might have just left Daggers a little speechless there because he can't believe I'm backing the Bucs defense to actually turn up. I am. We finish on Monday night. It's the Minnesota Vikings traveling cross country to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. The Vikings were one win away from being able to kick back, light that cigar, put their feet up this weekend and watch everyone else play. They were one win away from having that all-important, crucial extra week to recover from what was a really physical, bruising battle in Detroit last weekend. But they didn't play to their MO. They went for it on fourth down instead of taking the points. They weren't able to convert. They turned the ball over. Look, the scoreline said 31 points to 9. It wasn't as one-sided as that. But the Vikings now are having to turn around, go back on the road to a place where they lost to the LA Rams earlier this season and try and get their way past a Rams team who were able to kick up their heels last weekend. They tied up the division. They rested all their starters, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua. Their record may only be 10-7, and the odds makers say, well, there's nothing but a slip of paper between these two teams. They're making the Vikings 1.5-point favorites. But I think this is possibly the game of the weekend, and they're saving the best till last, Daggers.
Yeah, although it's an interesting. I couldn't believe the Rams rested their starters. I actually couldn't believe it. I mean, if you're looking at it, now they're facing the Vikings. Had they won that game, they would have been facing the Commanders, and I don't know who I would have preferred coming into that building. That said, you've still got to beat everybody to progress if you want to make a Super Bowl run. So there's two sides of that argument. Very quickly, I think Minnesota will be hurting after last week. I don't see this as a massive issue for them. Getting beat by Detroit in Detroit is, I don't think that's something to be held against you hugely. Defensively, their schemes have been sensational with Brian Flores, the DC. I think Kevin O'Connell will have his offense worked out against St. Louis, against the Los Angeles Rams. I've done it again, haven't I? I've gone back in time. I just think a 14-win team coming in, missing out on that bye, they'll be hurting. I think they'll be hurting, and I think they've got too much quality, especially defensively for the Los Angeles Rams. 8-3 when both Cooper, Kupp, and Puka Nacua play. Outside of that, it's a great stat, but they're still 8-3. It's not like they're 12-0 or 11-0. So I fancy the Vikings, to go into Los Angeles and get the win.
What if I said to you that last weekend's game aside, when they rested everybody, they were 5-0, the LA Rams, through the month of December coming into the postseason, and that included a home win over the Buffalo Bills when they put 44 points on the board in a campaign where Matthew Stafford has had to often play without one or both of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Kieran Williams has been a revelation for them. They did not expect at running back with that game-breaking speed that he has as well. And you've had an extra week to prepare, resting up, albeit against a Vikings team that have got 14 wins.
No, not buying it. Not buying it, Richard Graves. I just think, like I said, what I've been really impressed with the Rams is their defensively this year, the defensive front, the rookies that they've got. Jared Verse, especially from Florida State, who's come on and had a fantastic, arguably up there for Defensive Rookie of the Year honours. And that has hugely, because obviously you've got a gap to fill in Aaron Donald, but I think their defensive line play has been excellent. I still think there are too many holes for the Los Angeles Rams defensively. And again, I think they're a very well-rounded football team, the Minnesota Vikings. So for me, it's the Vikings at Los Angeles.
And what about the spread? So are you taking the Vikings to cover at -1.5?
Yeah, taking the Vikings to cover it. Done.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think in the Rams, you've got a quarterback who's a veteran that knows what it takes to win at this stage of the season. He won it all in this stadium. You've got a head coach who knows what it takes to manage a team through the playoffs, whether it's at home or on the road. And I think what you've seen from Sean McVay was extremely shrewd. He gave his roster game time last week in a competitive affair against the Seattle Seahawks. And I think for one of the rare times this season, you've now got an LA Rams offense that is fully fit and healthy. And Matthew Stafford has his weapons. I don't think you can underestimate the bruising that the Vikings took last weekend, both physically and mentally. Remember the way they started the game with linebacker Anzalone kept coming off and absolutely crushing Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, it looked good. It was a highlight play, but it was Gibbs who had the last laugh. He didn't even get a hand on Gibbs when he went in for one of his 4 touchdowns. I know a lot of Vikings fans have been saying it's when, not if, this bubble bursts. Sam Darnold has shown that fallibility. You know, everybody says, no, he's had a great season. He has 4,319 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 6th best passing offense in the NFL this season. But he's had games where it hasn't been really working for him as well. Let's not forget, they won 12-7 in Jacksonville in a game that stunk the place out, and they made mistakes. Darnold threw interceptions. He looked tight last week against the Detroit Lions in a big game when it had a playoff type atmosphere. They went to Arizona. They won ultimately, but again, it wasn't good. I just think that in this type of situation between these two teams, experience is going to matter. And I'm going to take Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, and the LA Rams to cause the upset. I'm taking them to win. And therefore, by virtue of that, they're covering the spread at +1.5. There we go. We finish on a divergence of opinion at last. Let's wrap it up and recap where we got. It starts on Saturday night, of course. The Chargers going to the Texans. We're both agreed. The Texans do not progress. It's the Chargers that win and cover the 3-point spread. Then it's on to the Steelers at the Ravens. The Steelers can't score, can't get out of their way. They'll score fewer than 18.5 points this game. The Ravens progress. Sunday evening, the Broncos and the Bills. This is going to be an interesting one. We have a difference of opinion. Both of us taking the Bills. I say the Bills will score more than 28.5 points. Daggers goes under. Then it's on to the Packers at the Eagles. The Eagles progress. Packers under 21.5 points. You betcha. The Eagles defense just too good. We agree on that. Then Sunday Night Football, the one Daggers will be watching avidly, the Commanders at the Buccaneers. Both of us taking the Buccaneers. I think the Bucs defense comes to play in this one. Go with the under 50.5 points. Daggers says not so fast. What do you say, Daggers?
No, go over. Go way over.
Before we finish with the Vikings and Rams Monday Night Football, and this is the big difference of opinion. Daggers, where are you going?
I'm going Vikings. And they obviously cover.
They cover. Well, I say the Rams, and the Rams cover at +1.5. They're the 6 games. Don't forget, you can read about what we've talked about on this show by going to my website, rdgmedia.uk. Click on the Talking Sport tab, and there you will see Wildcard Weekend Preview, all 6 games. Equally, hit us up on X, @RichardGraves1, RDG Media UK on Instagram, Facebook, Richard Graves RDG Media. Daggers, where can they find you if they want to talk to you this weekend?
At Charles Dagnall on pretty much every social channel. But just whatever happens, don't text me because I've got a flight to Malaysia on Wednesday, right? Flight to Malaysia, going to the Under-19 Women's T20 World Cup. And I thought, well, what better than having a 14-hour flight filled with wildcard games? So I'm going to stay away from all the wildcard games, download them for my flight. You will not be able to reach me. And if I see a text message from you, Richard Graves, that is it. We are done. We are through. Have a great wildcard weekend, everyone.
Are you seriously not watching the Bucs game live? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you're a better man than me, Daggers. Have a great trip. I'm not so sure I'll be able to keep quiet for that extra 72 hours. I will try. Daggers, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, mate. Great to see you.
Absolutely, likewise. Have a great flight. Enjoy Wildcard Weekend, folks. For this week, that's all. So long, everybody.
Subscribe to Graves on Gridiron wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep up to date with the latest on Twitter. Search for Richard Graves 1. That's Richard Graves, the number 1.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.